On YouTube, there's a channel that I really enjoy watching that's put on by a pastor in Wyoming named Matt Whitman. The channel itself is called the 10-Minute Bible Hour, and it's these 10-minute or so long videos about various things in the Bible. He does great overviews of things that are going on. He has a really fun Bible conspiracies video in which he comes out with tinfoil hat and all, just talking about all the crazy things that people find in the Bible. He's a really great guy, neat things that he talks about, and lately he's been doing a little mini-series on how to read the Bible that has offered some really excellent points on exactly that. Not too long ago, he gave 3 important points that you need to remember when you approach anything in the Bible. The first thing that you need to do is figure out what the passage is saying about God. Now, that seems very obvious, but we usually skip steps 1 and 2 and go straight to step 3, which you'll hear in a minute. The second step is to find out what this passage is saying about God's plan. And the third step is to figure out what it means for us. And now, you could skip steps 1 and 2, and a lot of people often do. You read the Bible and you say, oh, this is what it's saying to me today. And that's usually okay, but you generally miss a lot of stuff, and you open yourself up to the possibility of getting your interpretation of that passage very wrong because you didn't put it in its context. You didn't find out first what it was saying about God, because the Bible is a book about God, after all. You didn't find out what it was saying about God's plan, because the Bible is the story of what God's plan is from creation to new creation. And you end up with just, whatever's there on the surface. Our reading from Habakkuk today, it's real easy to look at it and just kind of come away with, when I'm in trouble, God helps me. And that's true. It's a good answer. It's a good Sunday school answer for sure, but you miss a lot when that's all you get from the passage. For one, the writings that Habakkuk is writing about are much bigger than we might think. And the book opens with the prophet crying out to God for rescue from injustice. The people of his time they're awful, doing horrible things. They're not following God. They're taking advantage of people. It's just a bad situation. So the prophet cries out to God, Lord, save us from all of this. And God says, I'm going to send the Babylonians to save you. And Habakkuk goes, wait, what now? You're going to send them? Because to have the Babylonians come and punish a people group for being terrible to each other would be like hiring a totally unrepentant bank robber to guard your bank vault. The Babylonians were worse than the Judeans were. So Habakkuk is very concerned that God is going to use the Babylonians, of all people, to punish Israel. It's just going to get worse. He's seen what the Babylonians have done to the Assyrians not too long before. He doesn't want the same thing to happen to his home in Judah. Now, God's response then is to have Habakkuk prophesy against the Babylonians some pretty awful stuff that will go to them. It basically amounts to the Babylonians will be the ones punishing Judah, but then the Babylonians are going to get punished too. And it's not a particularly satisfying response to me, but it seemed to be enough for Habakkuk, because his response then is to spend the 3rd chapter of his book praising God, celebrating God's justice. In a lot of ways, Habakkuk asks of God the same questions that Job asks. When Job goes through all of this suffering and he wonders why, the answer is, pretty much just as unsatisfying. What God tells Job amounts to build a universe and we'll talk. But what God tells Habakkuk is a little bit of that, but also God just says, I've got this. From the prophet's perspective, the Babylonians could have invaded at any time. This wasn't something that was a couple years down the road. It could happen that day for him. Judah was doing some really stupid things in that Judah allied itself with the Babylonians and then betrayed the Babylonians to ally with the Egyptians and then betrayed the Egyptians to ally with the Babylonians again and then betrayed the Babylonians again to ally with the Egyptians again. So the Babylonians, they're just waiting to get an army together to invade the people of Judah. And so Habakkuk is just astounded that the punishment seems worse than what's already going on. And yet God tells Habakkuk, I've got this. Yes, the Babylonians will invade, but the Lord is still in his temple. Let all the earth be silent before him. The Babylonians might bring anguish to Judah, but God goes out to save his people. Habakkuk sees the threat of violence from the Babylonians. He sees what might happen, but God is still on his throne. And he has faith that whatever happens, God still reigns. It's like when Paul is in prison and he's writing to the church in Philippi and he says, I've learned how to be content in every circumstance. I know the experience of being in need and I know the experience of having more than enough. I've learned the secret of being content in any and every circumstance, whether full or hungry, whether having plenty or being poor. I can endure any of these things through the one who gives me strength. And that's how Habakkuk is approaching his problems. He sees the injustice. He sees the potential for more violence. And he leans on God. So what does Habakkuk tell us about God? That he is on his throne. He is sovereign over what happens in the world. Even when calamity and tragedy happens, God is still there. What does that say about God's plan? That God intends justice and deliverance for his people. That when the poor are mistreated, he will rescue them. When the powerful are corrupt, he will take care of it. So what does this say for us? I think it says that God is trustworthy no matter what is happening around us. And whatever situation we find ourselves in, like Paul and like Habakkuk, we know that God is faithful. The prophet is anticipating, as he's praising God, an earthly deliverance. He's anticipating that whatever happens with the Babylonians, that God will save his people again. But we have an even better promise. We have the promise of an eternal deliverance. Because Christ didn't just deliver us from violence, but he delivered us from death. Here in the season of Advent, we prepare for two things. We prepare in these 4 weeks for Jesus' birth. We sit with the Israelites as they wait. We read from the prophets who are waiting the coming of a Messiah to save Israel. But we also wait for Jesus to come back. We wait for him to come again, not as a baby, but in glory. To come again and rebuild the world as a new creation, a picture of which we get at the end of the book of Revelation. And so we wait, but we have hope. And we wait for that hope to be fulfilled. And we find contentment knowing that God is trustworthy. And we can, because of the hope that we have for God's deliverance in our lives, we can find contentment in every situation because of the joy we have in Christ. We just read this morning in Adult Sunday School that the sufferings of this world are so small compared to the glory that we are promised in Christ Jesus. And whatever happens in this world, we can find peace in God because He is faithful. He is still on His throne. His promises are trustworthy. So that whatever we face on this earth, whatever troubles and trials come our way, we can trust in the God who says, I've got this, and lean on Him for our strength. So that even if the Babylonians come in our lives, we know that in God there is deliverance, and we too can sing His praises because He is worthy of our praise.